Vlogmas. In today's episode of Vlogmas, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into my sewing machines. I have 3 sewing machines plus 1 serger. I suppose that technically adds up to 4 sewing machines. We are going to start with my primary, the one that I have out on my sewing table a majority of the time, and then we're going to kind of go back in time to the very first sewing machine that I learned how to sew on. So let's go ahead and get started. This one is the B480. Before I purchased this machine, there were a few things that I wanted that my mechanical machine did not have. One of those things was an automatic buttonhole. I do demos of this in my videos, but the automatic buttonhole on the Bernina is incredible, particularly if you come from a machine where you're doing manual buttonholes. It's as simple as pressing this buttonhole icon on the screen. You get these options. I tend to choose either 51 or 52, and then you can set your length of the buttonhole here. If you wanted, you can hold a button up to this to measure, but you can also just use these millimeter guides. Anyway, this is not going to be too much of a tutorial into how to use the features of a Bernina, but automatic buttonhole was a really key thing for me. Another thing that I wanted was adjustable needle position, and that would be the ability for the needle to move left or right depending on a project. If I put a seam under the presser foot and I only have so much space to put my fabric under the presser foot, being able to adjust the needle position left or right is helpful. It's not mandatory, but it's helpful. You can see you can either move it to the left 5 places or move it to the right 5 places. Berninas it's definitely not the only machine that can do that. I think many machines have that feature. This is just one of the things that I was looking for. And then my mechanical machine most recently does have some of these thread cutter features, but this just has some extra ones. I like having a start-stop button that's not the foot pedal. I like being able to adjust the speed. My daughter also sews, and so she likes to have it on the slowest setting. Anything more powerful than that can be a little bit intimidating for anyone that's new to sewing. So this option is helpful. Oh, one of the other reasons why I opted for not a Bernina, but a different machine separate from my mechanical machine was that I liked having a free arm so that I could put sleeves on and they could rotate around. And again, it's not a mandatory thing. I've done sleeves and things like that without a free arm. It's just one of those things that just makes it helpful. And I sew clothing a majority of the time. So this is the machine that I use primarily. I like it a lot. And I know that not everyone really takes to computerized machines. And I know that Berninas also have a really particular method and style of functioning that also doesn't always work for people. So it's worth visiting your dealer and kind of deciding what is something that's actually going to work for you. They are also on the costly side. So when I purchased this, my goal was to choose my forever machine. I didn't want to kind of lust after machines anymore. This is the end game for me in terms of machines. One thing I will mention is that they have a lot of models, obviously. This one is the B480, and it's relatively small scale. I think there's a 300 series that's smaller and more compact, and it looks really great for even smaller spaces. But this is great for a small space. The space that I'm working with here is kind of limited to this size. So it works really great size-wise. They do have then the 500 series, 700 series, and 800 series, and that gets into larger machines with more space for quilting or embroidery or those sorts of projects, which is not a interest of mine, at least not now. So the B480 works really great for me. No regrets. I think I made a good choice. The reason why I chose the B480 versus something like in the 500 series that's not too large is that it's one of the few that does not have quilting, like a quilting theme. And by quilting theme, I mean like the kit that it comes with, the accessories that it comes with for this model oriented around garment sewing, which is what I wanted to do, versus a bunch of quilting feet that I'm never gonna use, or having to buy garment feet or presser feet. It just came with what I wanted for garment sewing, which is another one of the reasons why this particular model worked really well for me. This is the Juki TL18QVP. And this is a mechanical machine. So this particular machine is a semi-industrial, straight stitch only sewing machine. It has a lot of more up-to-date features for a mechanical machine, which is great. So it has this thread cutter, needle up, needle down position, feed dogs up or down, and then reverse. It also has this speed control, and then it has an extra pressure gauge as well as this foot pressure gauge, and you can see that here for particularly thick fabrics. So I purchased this machine at the recommendation of my local sewing machine shop, who I really love, and I purchased my Bernina from them as well. This machine is really great for what I was doing at the time, which was housewares, heavy canvas slip covers, you know, curtain panels, just a ton of heavy duty straight stitch. And you can kind of see right in here, it has a really high throat, a ton of space, and it's also great for quilting. So it's one of the reasons why when I chose my Bernina, I didn't want to get any quilting addition, because I already had a machine that covered those bases. It comes with a ton of quilting feet and accessories that I don't actually use. And then also, if you happen to look this up online, there is a decal that I've removed that is normally stuck here, but I took it off just because I really like the clean look. It does have a knee lift as well. This machine is powerful. So, you know, I mentioned my daughter likes to sew, and this is the one that I actually let her use most of the time. She can move it to the slowest speed setting, which is this little turtle icon. And it's really simple. It's really simple to use. It only goes backwards and forwards. There's no zigzag. So it's a really pure and simple straight stitch machine, which for most sewing is exactly what you're doing. That said, it doesn't do buttonholes, and it doesn't do adjustable needle position, and it has a bigger bed at the bottom, so the free arm aspect isn't there. You can certainly sew sleeves and narrow seams with a machine like this, don't get me wrong, but it's just one of those other perks to have a free arm. So I use this machine now primarily when I'm making something really heavy, so really thick denim, or, you know, layered denim or denim seams. I will come over and do this because it sews through like butter, for lack of a better term. And I think that for Vlogmas specifically, I'm going to work on a particular project. I won't be doing it today, but I will be working on a particular project where I could share with you kind of the sound and what it's like and how well it sews. I purchased this Juki from, like I said, my local sewing machine shop. They sell Juki, they sell Bernina, they sell Brother, Baby Lock, etc., and just works really well. I was turned on to Juki sewing machines in college, where we used the full-on table setup. So where it's mounted into the table and that the oil for the machine is in the table. This works really well for anyone who moves or has limited space, or where assembling a table setup is just not feasible, not realistic. It just works so great, and it's so powerful. It's just more portable. So it's more domestic, but with the power and the strength that you would want from a Juki industrial style machine. Highly recommend this if anyone is on the fence or has considered this. I really like this machine. One machine that I don't have to share with you, because I've traded it with my dad, is the Janome Gem Gold. So the Janome Gem Gold machine was my first real sewing machine purchase. And it was recommended to me by my mother-in-law, who also had one, and it's really great for travel. It's really compact, really small, but a really good quality machine. And that's a machine that I've made quilts on, made clothes for my daughter on. I'm a big Janome fan. Before I purchased my Bernina, and even before I purchased this, I considered getting a Janome, just any one of the more mid-range Janomes. But for a variety of reasons, I just made the choices that I made. So it's also a really great brand to consider. I was saving this one for last. So this last machine, as I mentioned with my Janome, I traded my dad for our home sewing machine. This is the Kenmore 1914. And this is the machine that I grew up learning how to sew on. Really, I mean, this is an old school workhorse of a machine. When I traded my dad and gave him my Janome Gem Gold so that he would have something to use at home, and I took this into my local sewing machine shop and had it serviced, and there really was very minimal that they had to do with it. It just is in such great shape. It does have a little bit of cosmetic nicks and that sort of thing, I think from when it was in the table, but otherwise it works great. I don't have it plugged in right now, but I'm going to probably work on a project during Vlogmas where I can share this with you and show you how it runs and how it sounds. It doesn't purr quite as well as my Juki or as my Bernina, but you wouldn't expect it to, so. And then I also wanted to share the original kind of vintage manual. So we have the cams and the accessories, and I can show you guys those. Accessories and buttonholer. So there's kind of just extra feet and this kind of buttonhole contraption, which I have not used yet. Pattern cams, so for any designs, you put in these, what are essentially like cartridges, into here, and then it gives you a little image of what it is, what it will create, I believe. So those are the cams, and then there's a monogrammer and templates. So that seems fun. It looks like there's kind of this embroidery hoop. This is an old foot package, I think. So I believe that this particular model might be a little bit harder to find, the 1914. If you are in the market for a vintage machine and you have experience sewing, I think that this would just be a lot of fun. It's like having you know, a particular type of car in your garage, and it's just kind of fun to use it. I don't necessarily know if it's great for beginners. There's not a way to, say, for example, adjust the speed, and there might be just more of a learning curve on some of these vintage, truly vintage machines. If I were a beginner, I would try to find a newer, beginner-friendly machine, just because I feel like it would be less to struggle and it would be easier to find support. I know that for vintage machines, it's not common that you would have the instruction manual, for example. And even if you did have the instruction manual, how well some of the features might work could really vary. That's my vintage Kenmore. And I'm looking forward to doing a video where I can share with you how it sounds, how it operates, and what the stitch quality is like, which is actually pretty amazing. So this is my serger. It's definitely not one of the top of the line sergers, either by Juki or any other brand. This is more of a lower priced serger. I didn't know how essential this would be for me when I first purchased it. So I wanted to find something that was a lower barrier to entry and was not a huge investment on my part if it didn't serve me really well. So far, it has served me tremendously well, and I would absolutely 100% always want a serger in my sewing kit, my sewing arsenal. Something that I do have to manually thread, and I know that you might hear sometimes about sergers and how much of a nightmare they are to thread, but I have to say, it's not so bad. It does take time. It does take time, and I give it that time. It's something that I sit down and I do. But one of the helpful things is there's this little diagram here that tells you, thread, your blue thread, your red, your green, and your yellow, and it guides you on the path that you thread it through. And you just kind of have to take my word for it. It's actually not that bad. I mean, clearly people do it all the time. And this is not the cleanest. I'm probably not showing you my cleanest little serger there, but I can't bring myself to show a dirty machine. It's really just not great hospitality. It's not a big deal to thread it, and you can see that there's these guides that are really clear in terms of where the thread goes, and then up at the top, these are color coded as well, so you know exactly what you're doing when. And then just my little quick tip, I add a colored tape on the base. I just have like these miscellaneous washi tapes that I use to kind of color code which thread spool is threaded into which color here. So again, Juki brand, big fan of Juki. I love them, and this serger overlocker is really fantastic. I do eyeball sometimes the baby lock sergers, and there's also a more robust Juki serger, which is something that I also check out all the time. But each time I think, oh, let me upgrade my serger, I think, well, you know what? This one works perfectly well. And despite having to thread it, since it doesn't have an auto threader, there isn't anything wrong with it. So I use it all the time and it works great. I think eventually I might want, if I did something where I serged a lot more, I might want something that had an air threader, or maybe like a basket that caught, or even like a free arm so that you can serge around narrower things. But again, not necessary right now. This is a really great serger. Those are my sewing machines. I'm trying to think if I left anything out. I don't think so. If you have any questions at all, please ask. I hope that was helpful for you if you're considering any one of those brands, any one of those types of machines, whether you're considering computerized or mechanical. And thank you so much for joining me in this episode of Vlogmas, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.